Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Ibrahim, in case I was not introduced. And as you can guess from my accent, I'm coming from West Africa. I'm Francophone. Not that French is my language, but the language which was imposed on me. So if you have some difficulties understanding me, it's just because it's not just I don't want to speak to you in the correct language, but that's the history behind it. And if you have any difficulties, one of my colleagues speak real English, they will translate. I would like to talk to you about a few issues. One is disasters and conflicts and how these issues are linked with the environment. I also would like to talk to you a little bit about marine and coastal environment and some of the challenges that we see at the moment. And I will maybe leave the floor if you have some questions to some of my colleagues that are here in the room. I would like to very briefly introduce them. Isabel Kempf, who is just standing here, is the head of our Poverty and Environment Initiative. This is a program we have in common with UNDP. Keith Alverson is the head of our Climate Change Adaptation and Terrestrial Ecosystems. He's actually the one that will be translating what I'm going to say because he speaks real English, native of the US. And Jacqueline Alder is the head of the Freshwater and Marine Ecosystems in UNEP. UNEP has done some studies from around the world to identify the links between disasters, conflicts, and the environment. I'll just focus on the conflicts and the environment. A few examples just to illustrate what we are saying. We all know about the flooding in Pakistan, and we all know that part of that was due to deforestation in Pakistan. We also have noticed a number of forest fires, notably in the Mediterranean, but also in Indonesia and other parts of the world. And part of that is due to change of forest management techniques and change of species. And unfortunately, people have done a lot of monoculture, and of course that is generating more vulnerability in times when there's a forest fire. We also noticed a number of extreme events like droughts. There's drought going on at the moment in the Sahel in West Africa, which is affecting millions of people. Last year, the same situation happened in the other part of Africa, which was in Eastern Africa, in the Horn of Africa. And these are extreme events that we know will be occurring on a regular basis. What we do as human beings is to respond to the crisis after it has happened, and most of the time we react late. We don't have the machinery to react very quickly, and most of the time when we react, it is a little bit too late. Luckily, in the case of Horn of Africa, the reaction was very quick and very efficient, and there were fewer lives that were affected by that. What our colleagues from the World Food Programme have assessed themselves is that in the case of Horn of Africa last year, up to 4 million lives were actually, or people were saved from hunger thanks to plantations that happened in Ethiopia. Efforts by the government of Ethiopia itself, but supported by other organizations, including UNEP. What it does is when you have these plantations on the hills, even with a little rain, actually you have more humidity on the soil, so people can actually grow their crops. And then there is less erosion, of course, with these plantations. So when a sister agency like the World Food Programme that normally distributes food to affected community comes back to us and say, hey, that's great, we are really happy that these plantations were there. We feel that actually this is a good result and there's a good outcome from that. Some of the case studies we have done from around the world have proven that 40 to 60% of internal conflicts have links with the environment. Over the last 60 years, we have done a broad analysis worldwide, and these are the results that came. And these conflicts can be linked to access to water, access to soil, or diamond, or oil. So it can be renewable or non-renewable sources. Only 25% of peace agreements include natural resources in their provisions. This is something that we have to take care about and to be really cautious about, because again, as human beings, what we do when there's a conflict, with all the good faith and the good willing, we actually send more troops, more food, and more assistance to these people that are affected by these conflicts. In signing peace agreements, unless you take into account the root causes of the conflicts, the troops that you send there or the food that you send there will not be sufficient to actually resolve the problem. And there is therefore a very high risk of relapse within the 5 years of an agreement being signed unless these root causes are addressed. Let me give you a few examples. The situation in Sudan is terrible, and we all know what is going on in Darfur. Another example could be the Democratic Republic of Congo. We have done studies in many of these countries. In the case of Sudan, what our teams have realized is that actually the conflict has very strong links with access to water. Because of climate change, because there is not much water and the increase of the population, there is a fierce competition for access to water, access to soil, access to wood for cooking and other needs. So therefore, the links with natural resources is very, very strong. That combined with a weak governance at the level of the state or at the local level has triggered huge conflicts. Yes, we know that the conflict in Sudan is terrible. It is tribal. It is ethnic. It is, supported in many ways by the government at that time. But the root causes are actually access to natural resources. What led to these conflicts was actually a law from the colonial system, which scrapped the traditional tribunals and the customary ways of managing conflicts, and actually created official tribunals in capital cities of the regional provinces and so forth. So this is where the modern law actually should have complemented the customary law, but unfortunately the customary law was undermined. Now most of these conflicts are happening at the village level, and most of these people do not have time or do not have the will to go hundreds of miles away to go to a tribunal, and we know that these cases have been compiled because there is no capacity to actually have the judgments. So over time, you reach a tipping point where actually there's a series of small conflicts here and there, and because these conflicts are happening between people that are usually farmers and pastoralists, and farmers or pastoralists are not necessarily from the same tribe, it becomes a tribal problem, a tribal conflict. But it is essentially a conflict for access to natural resources. Now, again, compounded by the weak governance and so forth. UNEP has a very strong program on conflict and disasters. We have worked in the Balkans. We have a very strong program in Afghanistan. We have a vibrant program in Sudan. We have now one in the Democratic Republic of Congo. We have one in Haiti. We have one in Sierra Leone, etc., etc. And all of these are actually, we will have now one in Cote d'Ivoire at the request of the government of Cote d'Ivoire. All of these are coming at the request of governments for UNEP to come and help them assess the post-conflict situation, looking at different sectors that I mentioned earlier on, and to help them make recommendations for the government itself to invest or to find other partners that would make investment that hopefully will help them resolve the conflict on the longer term rather than just addressing the superficial issues. The second issue I wanted to just mention very briefly is the situation in the oceans. I'm sure you're all familiar with this, but we will be 9 billion people on Earth by 2050, according to estimates. Right now, we are facing already big challenges. Now, by 2050, we will have 6 billion people living in cities. As you know, we are now the world is now living more in cities than in the rural areas. 51% of the world live now in cities. So you will have 6 billion people living in cities. Currently, we are facing a huge challenge on treatment of wastewater. This may be trivial to you, but it is a very serious issue. We have done a global study that has demonstrated that up to equivalent of 2 billion tons of wastewater are discharged daily. 2 billion tons of wastewater. And it will keep growing as the population grows and as we move into cities. This situation is causing huge health problems. Just to focus on the health issue, more people die from waterborne diseases now than all forms of violence, including wars. So it's pretty serious. We also know that while this is a problem now in terms of wastewater management, this problem can be turned into an opportunity if we retreat this, do some treatments of these waters, either through technologies or through eco-sanitations or through other techniques. In many parts of the world, there's no enough fresh water to produce or to plant trees or to produce some type of food for animals and so forth. So it is possible to actually turn this challenge into an opportunity whereby you actually treat this water, you plant, instead of using your fresh water, you actually use this recycled water. The second challenge in the marine world, I'm just talking about man-made or human-made, whatever challenges, is the marine debris. Up to 6 million tons of debris are discharged on the oceans every year. 6 million tons. Most of these remain on surface or just below surface. And that is creating huge problems. I think the US is actually an extreme case with the situation that you have in this country due to the currents. But this is also creating huge challenges to ships because they don't see them and they can actually be destroyed by these debris. Up to 1 million seabirds die every year because of these marine debris. What it does also is to create some risks for our own health because some of these debris are plastics. And these microplastics can actually go into the algae and they can be eaten by organisms and they may end up on our plate. And you would never know where they would be coming from. Of course, we have very good sanitary systems here in the US that will control everything, make sure that your fish is safe, but that is not the case in all parts of the world. So this is creating a serious problem, and it is not something that you can address just on your own. It is something that requires international cooperation. Yes, you can address it from the sources, but once it gets into the sea, you will need to cooperate with many other organizations. And the US, again, is very active on this and has been supporting UNEP's work. The US hosted a marine debris conference last year, and UNEP has a vibrant program dealing with these marine issues. Both the marine debris, the wastewater, and the third issue, which is nutrients, are actually addressed by an intergovernmental process, intergovernmental body, which is a non-legally binding instrument, which was signed, by the way, in Washington in 1995, called the Global Program of Action for Land-Based Source of Pollution to the Marine Environment. And the intergovernmental review, which was organized earlier this year, has identified these three issues as priority for the Global Program of Action: marine debris, wastewater, and nutrients. And in all three, UNEP is working with US institutions, and most of the time, actually, in two of the cases, the US institutions are taking the lead on that. I can also talk to you about the threats to our coral reefs. Because of climate change and because of urbanization and because of development in the coast and activities or human activities, our experts have done some studies that actually indicate that more than 80% of the world's coral reef may be destroyed within decades. This is a serious issue because more than 500 million people depend on coral reefs in the world. So it will have severe consequences on the ecosystems for sure, but it will affect 500 million people from around the world. 80% of coral reefs in the world, and that will be affecting regions like the Caribbean, the Western Pacific, the Indian Ocean, the Persian Gulf, and many other parts of the world. So this is, again, one of the issues that I just wanted to highlight so that we can have a discussion and debate around it. By 2050, coastal development will, of course, increase. And we all know that our cities are more or less 100 kilometers along the coast, most of the cities in the world, 2/3 of the world population. And it is, again, some of the analysis done by our experts project that this development will impact 90% of all inhabited coasts by 2050. This is a very serious issue in the developing world, maybe less in the developed world, but there's a growing development. And there are many other cities, and there's a growing population in many parts of the world, especially in Africa and in Asia. And most of these additional 2 billion population between now and 2050 will actually live in the coast, because that's where the infrastructure are, that's where the roads are, that's where the ports are, and that's where the export is done. And most of the capital cities and big cities are either on the coast or alongside big rivers. We do have a number of programs that address these issues. One of them that we have developed recently is what we call green economy in a blue world. This is not to say that the world should be changing. This is to say that development has to be done in a more sustainable way. This is also to say that in many parts of the world, not only in the developed world, but in the developing countries as well, there's a new path for development that should be looked at, and that opportunities are there for job creation, for investments, and so forth. Let me give an example. I was in Greece 3 weeks ago and had discussions with the Minister of Environment and many other colleagues there. And of course, you know the situation in Greece at the moment. And the Minister of Environment is in a very, very difficult situation because they are actually being accused of being a hindrance to development or to growth, or they are the cause of many of the economic and financial challenges that they have there. And the Minister of Environment of Greece is actually seeing this green economy as a new opportunity because, of course, Greece is a very touristic country, very attractive in terms of tourism. What kind of tourism do they need to develop there that will be compatible with sustainable development approaches, creating new jobs, because they are in a desperate need of creating new jobs, but at the same time reduce the impact on the environment, reduce the water consumption, reduce the waste that is going on generated by these touristic activities, and so forth and so forth. That is just one of the sector of the touristic sector, because it is a big sector in Greece. There are many other countries in the world, and we have now many countries that are requesting UNEP to actually provide them with expertise that is needed to see how they can change their policies, their development policies, to have a more sustainable approach into their policies. So the green economy is not only about talks, as some people may think. It's also about changing policies to make sure that the Rwandas of the world, or the Malaysias, when they develop their own plans, actually take into consideration the environmental issues. One last example I wanted to give is Indonesia, where there is a very serious debate at the moment on what they should be doing with their forests. It's a big forest country, and we have quite a big program there on RED, or reduce emissions from deforestation and forest degradation. And there is a debate between the Minister of Finance on one hand and the Minister of Environment on the other hand. The Minister of Finance seeing forests like just a set of trees. And for them, these trees have very, very limited value. Therefore, what they are proposing to do is to cut these trees and plant palm oil. And there are big investments that are promised to them, billions of dollars, that they would actually have a 10% growth thanks to these investments that will be made in the country. On the other hand, you have the ministry in charge of forests and the other ministers who care about forests and who would come to the president and say, this investment by these companies is a short-term gain. Yes, maybe in the next 5 years you will have some gain. If you just care about your term, that's what you should be doing. If you care about the long-term plan and about the future of this country and the generations to come, then you should have a serious consideration on what is it that forests generate, not only in terms of carbon, which is very important now. They have now some serious investments on carbon from Norway and other countries. Norway just gave them $1 billion. But also the ecosystem services that are provided by these forests. One indigenous person that I talked to in Indonesia, asking her, why do you want to protect this forest? She said, very simple. They provide clean water to me. I live in a village. The government doesn't provide me with clean water. And the day I realize that I have no access to clean water anymore, then I will realize that the forest is degraded. I'll just maybe stop here to see if we can have some interaction. All the difficult questions will be responded by my talented staff members. And all the political questions will be responded by Amy Frankel, who is our regional director for North America. By the way, I forgot to introduce her. Sorry, Amy. So if you have difficult questions, please address them to them, and then let me see what I can complement. Sorry about my terrible accent. I hope you don't have headaches by now.
I was wondering if you could just talk a little bit about the challenges to providing economic analysis of the benefits of conservation, whether it's in oceans or in forests, because I think that's one of the issues that we've been seeing over the past few years.
Yeah. How do we do this? We respond to questions one by one? Or? Yeah. There have been good progress over the last few years on economic analysis of valuation of ecosystem services. I don't know if you're familiar with the report which is called TEEB, the Economics of Ecosystems and Biodiversity, which is really a very first attempt to do a solid analysis of the valuation of ecosystem service. One of the challenges we were facing up to now as organizations or people dealing with the environment is when we go to ministries of planning and finance, we talk about environment, they look at us, especially in developing countries, they say we need to feed our people first before we care about the environment. We need to educate our people. These are our priorities. And you can understand where they are coming from. Now, unless you have solid economic analysis, they will not listen to you. Understandably, because they are elected to actually take care of their people. And they feel that the environment is nice, but is not producing much for them. Yes, you can say that the environment produces some water for you, produces some fruits for you, animals, produces some livestock, but there is no economic valuation. So TEEB has done great work in analyzing that. In oceans, actually, Jackie can speak about this a little bit longer, but we are developing now a TEEB for oceans, because the report which was produced so far has been focusing on terrestrial ecosystems, and still needs to be mainstreamed at the country level and at the local level. But for oceans, we need to have a more analysis on the economic value of these oceans, not only in terms of production for ourselves, but other services that are provided. If you enjoy the beach of any country in the Caribbean, it is because the ecosystem is healthy. You will not buy your ticket, go to a place where the beach is dirty or not clean, or you have the risk of having some disease and so forth. So that's just the example that we can give in terms of value for the. But you have to give a dollar sign to that tourism and say this is a healthy ecosystem. So there is something that is being done on forests. We have made quite good progress especially on TEEB and on the green economy itself. We have done a specific report on green economy and forests. If you don't have it, maybe you can find it on the UNEP website. There's a lot of work that has been done on green economy, and this one was specifically done on forests. Again, this is not the total, we have not completed all the analysis yet, but it is just an attempt to provide many people with the methodology for them to go down at the district level, at the national level, or a specific sector to actually do the evaluation work. And our teams, again, are extremely busy, our teams, because we have a lot of requests from Brazil, from Indonesia, from India, from Chile, from Botswana, etc., to do some kind of work. And we are working with the World Bank, for example, on a program called WAVES. Don't worry about the acronym, but it is about economic valuation of ecosystem services. And UNEP is partnering with the World Bank because we feel that no matter what, we are an environmental organization. Economic affairs, financial issues have to be mainstreamed into institutions like the World Bank, and we are very happy that the World Bank and the president himself, actually, Zolik, launched this initiative in Nagoya 18 months ago and has taken it now very, very seriously. By the way, the World Bank also has now initiated this Oceans Partnership that UNEP is a founding member of. And that, again, is a very good step from our perspective, because countries need investments. And the World Bank is one of the investment tools that are instruments that they have to actually invest on issues like wastewater treatment, to invest on issues like cleaning beaches or maintaining coral reefs and so forth and so forth.
So you touched on the risk to delta coastal regions, and we all know that sea level rise in those areas is going to have a dramatic impact on low-lying countries and island states. But you didn't mention the impacts of increased changes in chemistry, the acidification of the oceans, and the impacts that that's going to have on marine food supply. And I'm wondering if UNEP has done research analysis on that issue, and what were the conclusions, and what, if anything, can be done about it?
The only thing you can do is to reduce your carbon emission. Once it gets into the ocean, I don't think there's anything you can do. There are some crazy experiments going on in some parts of the world, but I don't think at the moment there is a technology that can actually fix the issue once you have the CO2 on oceans. I just mentioned the coral reefs as an example, and saying that up to 80% of coral reefs can be lost, unfortunately, largely due to ocean acidification. And it is a serious problem, I think, to many countries. The expert is actually Jackie Aldo. I promise you that all the difficult questions will be responded by my colleagues. She is the marine specialist, and maybe you can have the mic.
In terms of what UNEP is doing to try and deal with the issue of acidification, as Ibrahim said, technologically we can't do anything, but we are working through our regional seas programs to actually try and strengthen the resilience of marine ecosystems, so that as these systems adapt to increasing acidification, there are options to maintain that biodiversity, so that one sort of system, for example, a shift from hard corals to soft corals, will still enable that system to provide the ecosystem services like water quality, shoreline protection, etc. It's just that it's going to be a different suite of biodiversity that provides those services. So we're working with member states to try and establish marine protected areas to ensure that biodiversity is there, to hopefully fill the gaps that will take place in an acidifying ocean. That's one area that we're trying to help member states to cope with increasing acidification. We've also got a blue carbon program that will help to increase the mitigation impacts. We're finding more and more, as we support research, to look at coastal ecosystems and their ability to sequester or long-term storage of carbon, that we're finding mangroves, for example, are key systems that will help to sequester carbon, and we're finding that through the research that we've been supporting, it's actually, in fact, the mud that is going to be the place that keeps the carbon. And so it's really critical that we work with member states to find really good management schemes to maintain those muddy areas of mangroves, and to highlight to the finance department, for example, that by maintaining these mangroves, you've got shoreline protection, you've got increasing fisheries habitats or maintaining fisheries habitats, nutrient cycling, so that not only fisheries but other parts of the system. And mangroves also play a key role in maintaining water quality in that sort of intertidal area that's behind the mangroves and maintaining those. So we're working to try and as Ibrahim said, on these ecosystem values, is to find out more and more about these sort of unvalued parts of the ecosystem, so that, again, with acidification, if we maintain these, we have this a resilience to hopefully enable us to make that shift in whatever systems we need to. So we've got an active program on lots of fronts. But bottom line is reduce carbon emissions every way you can.
On the sea level rise part of the question, of course, there are many techniques. The one that jumps in mind is, seawalls. We are not saying that seawalls will not be needed, and they are essential in many parts of the world, but you cannot fence the whole coast of the world with a seawall. So there are ecosystem-based solutions, as we call them, that would be useful, and one of them is actually, the coral reefs that could be built, and maybe Keith can say a little bit of that.
Sure. With regard to impacts of sea level rise, there was an interesting article in the Science Times just last week about the vulnerability on the U.S. East Coast, but of course it's a global problem. Often there's a lot of variability in many aspects. There's a variability in where the sea level is rising. So over the last 20 years, sea level off the U.S. West Coast has been going down, not up. So there's quite a variability there we have to understand. There's also a variability on the land side. In some places, land may be rebounding from the glacial loads. In some cases, the land may be subsiding very rapidly due to, for example, groundwater extraction. So this is the example in Bangkok. There was dramatic flooding in Bangkok last year, and much of that was due to a high tide signal. Bangkok, the sea level rise from climate change over the last decade or two has been on the order of many millimeters, but the subsidence from groundwater extraction has been many meters. So you have the situation where you do have an ability, unlike with the acidification problem, to look at these multiple stressors that are leading to vulnerability to sea level rise and act on some of them. And so in the case of groundwater extractions in Bangkok, it's reduce it. And you can go a long way to decreasing your vulnerability to sea level rise. I'm not sure if I answered the question, but I talked a bit about sea level rise.
One more question. Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, so it's clear that more and more attention is given to the ocean, but do you think we could achieve our goal without very strong reflection about the governance? Because currently we haven't any international body to take care of the oceans, and the current body are regional and by sectors. We have the fisheries bodies, regional conventions, and they have not power to do something. So I would be happy to have your views on that.
Thank you. Let me introduce you, because it is important that people know that the Global Environment Facility is in this room. Thank you for that question. Governance of oceans is, of course, a complex issue. The overarching text is the United Nations Law of the Sea. UNEP has supported the establishment of a number of regional seas. These are regional bodies where governments come to sign agreements, conventions, protocols, sometimes legally binding, sometimes non-legally binding. There are 18 regional seas from around the world, covering pretty much all the big, large marine ecosystems of the world, maybe except North America, because you don't need, with Canada, you don't need a UN body to assist you. These are very important tools for cooperation. And actually, the U.S. is party to the Cartagena Convention, which is managing the Caribbean Sea. And there are frameworks for cooperation where you would actually have some specific protocols like the land-based source of pollution protocol or coastal zone management protocols that are legally binding and some ratified by EU parliaments, where you really have concrete actions on the ground. This is very important because if you want to manage the oceans of the world, you will have to come down to sectors that are manageable, where you can have an easier cooperation. While it is very important for the US to cooperate with Japan, and we have, with Fukushima, we see now one of the reasons why we need to cooperate at the international level, but it is also very important to cooperate at the regional level. So that is one. There are other structures like the Fisheries Management Authority organizations that are also out there, and there are many other frameworks that are there, but I would like to just focus on these regional seas conventions because they're extremely important. I would be making a big mistake if I do not say a few words in 1 minute about the Poverty and Environment Initiative. I think Isabel will just give me a big tap if I don't speak about the Poverty and Environment Initiative. UNEP and UNDP have come together to work in a very coordinated, it's quite unique actually in the UN, where we have a symbiosis way of organizing ourselves with one team, one bank account, one financial system to manage a program that is supporting now 20 countries in the world to do poverty and environment activities. Very examples, I'll just take one in the interest of time. In Latin America, in Montevideo City, UNEP and UNDP are actually assisting the poorest of the poor. It turns out that up to 20% below the poverty line, and some of them were actually collecting garbage, solid waste, and without any hygiene, without any consideration. But you know what it means to collect garbage in many parts of the world. These people have now been assisted, they have been empowered, they have been given technologies, appropriate technologies, they have been given tools, they do it in a hygienic way. They now have bank accounts. They have been transformed into entrepreneurs to actually manage waste. And some of them commented saying, thanks to this program, we are now human beings. We are no longer people living in garbage. We are now human beings. We are now clean. Our children go to school. We have health care, etc., etc. And this is a very simple example where actually in working together, you can transform a big challenge into an opportunity while creating jobs, while making people happy, and while actually creating opportunities for some people that otherwise would have been left over.
Thanks, Ibrahim. If your boss doesn't belong to the International Conservation Caucus, please try to get them to join. And if they don't belong to the Oceans Caucus Foundation, please try to get them to join. And let us know if we can help with any of that. And I mentioned the Rio 20. Let me know if any of your bosses might be interested in that particularly. And if you have any questions on these or other issues we can help with, we're at your disposal. Thanks.
Thank you very much for this opportunity. It has been great to have this cooperation with you. And it is very important for UNEP to have people who care about the environment at the national level. And really thank you for that, and thank you for this opportunity.
Thanks, Ibrahim. Thank you all. Thank you all for being here today.